Management accounting consists of two parts, so 2601 and 2602. The 2602 is your finance modules, your investments and stuff like that, and your decision making on what you're choosing. Your 2601 is all your costing, and you're generally dealing with manufacturing industries. So you're not dealing with, I bought a house and am I buying this house or that house? You're dealing with how I'm actually costing my inventory and how I'm costing my stock and everything that goes into it, what's relevant, what's not relevant, how we're allocating things to actually make decisions. So it is still decision making, but it's decision making at stock level mostly. Yeah. So a lot of today is a lot of theory. There is some practical that you guys are going to do, and I'm going to get you guys to do some examples as well, just to see where you guys are at. But you need to understand the theory for this. So if you don't understand, and just looking at this first page, if you don't understand what a direct cost is, you're not going to be able to do the practical. So this isn't where the theory is one part and the practical is another. You need to understand both of them, and they can ask a little bit of both. So I actually just want to quickly go back here. I opened an exam paper. Just don't know where it is anymore. Okay, so this is one of the exam papers. This is last year's October-November paper. So as you can see, it's made up of 4 different questions, and this is generally how they're going to ask it. And there is multiple choice questions. So the multiple choice questions can be little quick questions, or they can be theory. So don't disregard the theory. It still is important, and you need to just know a little bit of everything. So not to scare you, but this is basically how majority of your exam papers are going to be set out. So nothing's worth 30 marks for one whole question. That's going to be when you get to third year, and you're going to hate it. Okay, so these are the multiple choice questions that you get. So you'll see some of them are going to be theory, and some of them are going to be calculations that you need to do. Do all of you guys have your calculators with you? Okay, you need to make sure you bring a calculator to class. If you don't have a calculator, I've got 2 here you can borrow for today. But otherwise, guys, a calculator every single class, no exceptions. Okay. So it's necessary to understand the different cost types in terms of how a cost accounting system calculates cost depending on the cost object. So what is a cost object? It's a cost object is an activity, a unit or phenomenon which a cost can be accumulated and measured. So something that happens and then this cost is arrived at. So example, any type of product, i.e. a handbag. So the example that they've used here is actually quite nice. So we've got a handbag, and for those of us ladies here, we go and we just buy a handbag in store, and it's as simple as that. But there's all the stuff that goes into making that handbag. It's not just, okay, there's some leather and it glued together and it's great, it's the handbag. There's a lot of the production that goes through it. So part of it is going to be your direct cost. So the direct costs can be traced easily or physically to a particular cost object. So the leather that you use for the handbag, if there's any branding or stuff like that, all of that is your direct cost. You can trace how much leather you put in each bag, how much material you put on each bag. It's direct. It's not a guessing game. You know that you use a meter per bag. That is a direct cost. So anything that can be attributed directly to the item that you're making, whether it's a chair or whatever, that is what we call direct. Your indirect cost can't be traced easily or physically to a particular cost object. So here they've said the coloring used, the color of the leather. So if we've got our leather and we're dyeing it a color, how much dye? Because you're dyeing a whole lot of bags all at once, or a whole lot of leather strips all at once. So how much dye is going per bag? You can't actually go and say, okay, well, it's going to be 5 mils in every single bag. The same with your stitching. You don't know how much cotton you're using. You've got a whole roll, you've got a sewing machine, you're putting it through. So all of that is indirect cost. So it's still directly with the bag, but you can't go and say it's this exact 10 centimeters of cotton that goes to the strap and everything. It's a bit too difficult to tie up. Okay. So guys, I'm not going to go through the UNISA information or the study guides. Sorry. But please do all these activities, and this is what's going to be part of your homework, is to go through and do the activities. They're very good. So go through, they give you a bit of an understanding. There's a lot to cover, so I'm not going to sit and go through all of their work as well. The notes, though, are quite sufficient, guys. So now we get the classifications of the cost according to the nature or the origin. So you get your total operating cost. And guys, this is very, very important, all of this. So you'll see, if you look at the next page, it basically continues. And the reason why we need to understand all of that is in the exam, they're going to ask us how to calculate everything. So if we don't know what a direct material is, we're not going to be able to go and calculate what the direct materials are from the information they've given us. So this is where your theory is now starting to tie in. It's no longer just practical. You need to understand what you're doing. Okay. So the first thing we have is your total operating costs. These are manufacturing costs, also called factory or production costs. So in MAC2601, there's a lot of different names for certain things. You need to know if they ask, what are your factory or production costs? You need to know what it is. Okay, so you can't just say, well, it doesn't say total operating costs. We didn't learn that. You need to know all the terms. They can use any one. So this is non-manufacturing costs, also called commercial costs. Okay, so manufacturing plus non-manufacturing is your total. So your manufacturing costs, and this is what it splits into. So it's that plus that. Your manufacturing costs are the total of the costs incurred in the manufacturing production process, which comprise of your direct material, your direct labor, and your manufacturing overheads. So these are what we're going to go through separately on the next page. And your non-manufacturing, so remember, manufacturing is everything that you can attribute to manufacturing. Your non-manufacturing, there's two categories, so your marketing. How do I sell my handbags? I need to advertise, but is one advert direct? Is it manufacturing? So remember, guys, manufacturing is the process of actually making that bag, the labor that goes into it, the material, the time spent, not the sales part of it. Okay. And then we have administrative costs. So someone's there going, and I'm the finance person. I need to go and actually print an invoice and phone the customer for payments. All of those costs, it's still to do with the actual bag. I mean, we sold the bag. I need to invoice. I need to buy the stock and everything to make the bag. How do I get that? I hire a person, so there's all these administrative costs, including your paper, telephone, rent, that kind of stuff, because we need a place to sit and do our work. Okay, okay, so now we're going to get down to the little pieces. So your direct materials are all materials that can be identified as forming part of the individual finished product. In other words, it is an identifiable, an identifiable component of the finished product, the leather used to making a handbag. So can anyone give me an example of a material that we make a chair with, our direct material? Wood. Okay. So if you're making a chair, a wooden chair, obviously not the chairs that you're sitting on, you're going to have wood as a component. Your direct labor is going to be the work that's needed to convert the direct materials into an individual finished product. So yes, a lot of companies have machines now that make a lot of products, but there's still a lot of lines where they have people sitting there folding, packing, stitching and everything. So we've got now classy handbags here. We're not using cheap handbags, so we've got people going and stitching and actually doing the sewing. So that labor of that person sewing the bag together, dyeing the material, making sure that the logo's on and everything, that is your direct labor. So they're going to spend 5 hours putting one bag together. So the example here is the wage of the seamstress sewing the leather into the handbag. If you're looking at a chair, a wooden chair, you're going to look at the carpenter that's putting the chair together, whether he's cutting the wood, and I don't know how to make a chair, guys. I am more handbag type of person. Okay. So we get our prime costs or our primary costs. So either name, guys. And this is the direct material and the direct labor. So the two most important things, or the two main things when you produce a product, is your material and labor, which is why it's a primary cost. So if you don't want to learn theory, because I hate learning theory, just remember your important things, it's your primary costs. Okay. Your manufacturing overheads is your indirect material, plus your indirect labor, plus your other manufacturing costs. So we're getting into what these are now, but your indirect material, like I said, we can't go and say how much dye we use to color the leather or how much cotton we use to sew the bag together. So that is going to be your indirect material. So indirect materials are materials that cannot be linked to a specific individual product because of the following two reasons. So we know that we're going to use 10 liters of dye to for this last batch of handbags that we made, but we don't know how much was specific to each one. So we know what we used it for because it's an actual material for the production or the dye for the handbags, but we can't actually attribute it to a specific handbag. So it's still relating to the product and it's still almost direct to the product, but we can't do it to an specific unit. So don't get confused to say that it's completely outside of the product just because it's indirect. It's still the product itself. It's just we can't say this much for one handbag. So it's used for all products rather than for a specific individual product. So your example is machine oil. So it's a small item of material where it is not cost effective to trace the cost to individual products. So coloring to color the leather. Some people may even say the screws on a chair, for instance, you may not be able to trace because there's so many screws in a chair that you're putting together, or nails, however you put wood together and stuff. So you may not be able to trace how many nails went into each chair. So it may just be easier to take your average amount of nails that you use for 100 chairs and divide it by the number of chairs that you manufactured with it. Okay. Your indirect labor costs include the wages or salaries of all employees who do not work on the product itself, but who assist in the manufacturing process. So this is the wage of the factory cleaner or the supervisor. So we've still got a factory, you've got the person putting our chair together, the person putting our bag together, but what about the guy that has to come and make sure the machines are still working and making sure everyone's there? So not me as the finance person that's sitting in the admin office, that's an administrative thing, but the manufacturing staff, the factory staff, those are the people that we're looking for indirect labor. So please don't confuse the salary of a finance person and the salary of your factory staff.